I have an Indian American friend who, like many Indian Americans, comes from a family of doctors and engineers. After graduating high school, he went to college to study engineering. And after a couple years in the field, feel like it wasn't his thing. So one afternoon, he went home and wanted to tell his family. He went up to his father and said, "Dad, I don't want to be an engineer anymore, but I have no clue what I want to do with my life." His dad looked at him lovingly and said, "Son, I'm 60 years old, and I still don't know what I want to be when I grow up. I, on the other hand, know exactly what I want to be when I grow up. I want to be the president of France." Now, okay, that's a little specific. I'm French, after all, so I guess my odds are 1 in 60 million. It's better than winning the lottery, right? But when I think about what I need to do to become president, I think about all the steps I'll need to take to get there. What's the ideal background? What's the ideal path to be a presidential candidate in, say, 30 years? Is it the same as it is today? The leaders of tomorrow will need to understand not only law and economics, but also technology. I mean, think about it. Political leaders today have to grapple with the extreme complexity of issues such as the ethics of stem cell research, or genetic engineering, or global warming. How can we possibly imagine what we're going to be faced with in 30 years? I mean, we've all seen the Terminator, right? Technology is more important today than it ever has in our history. The importance of emerging fields like bio-nanotechnology, which I studied here while I was at Rice, will profoundly change the way we look at society and interact with the world. What sort of technical knowledge will our leaders tomorrow need to know in order to effectively govern? So, of course, I want to know the answers to that question. But what I want most of all, and what most people like me want, is to change the world. It's cool to change the world. People feel compelled to do so these days. But I feel like when you ask people, why do you want to change the world, or what are you trying to change in the world? They just repeat something that they've heard from somebody else, or they just don't know what to say. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm all about changing the world. But it's become this cliche sentence that confused young people kind of utter when they don't know what to do. It used to be, a couple of years ago, that you could change the world simply by virtue of being a scientist. I'm reminding a little bit of Victor Weisskopf, who was a physicist, who starting in 1969, wrote a series of essays on the privilege of being a physicist. Rather than try to paraphrase him, I'll quote him directly. "A physicist enjoys certain obvious privileges in our society. He is reasonably paid. He is given instruments, laboratories, complicated and expensive machines, and is asked not to make money with these tools, like most other people, but to spend money. Furthermore, he is supposed to do what he himself finds most interesting, and he accounts for the money he spends to the money givers in the form of progress reports and scientific paper that are much too specialized to be understood or evaluated by those who give the money, the federal authorities, and the last analysis, the taxpayer." You know, when I read this, I can't help but wonder if the scientists that were let go from Johnson Space Center a couple years ago feel privileged today. The stature of the scientist has really fallen since the 1970s, really. From the turn of the 20th century until then, the position of a scientist in our society was lofty. I mean, they put a man on the moon. They discovered the double helix. They enable us to understand our place in the universe. But that's not the case anymore. It's extremely complicated to be proficient in science. And there's been that rise of a disconnect between science and the public that really makes research paper almost like they were written in a foreign language. It's important that the public can connect with scientists, Because whether you look at issues like global warming or stem cell research, whatever side you're on, whatever your arguments, you can only have an informed policy debate if both sides are informed. We need scientists to connect with their communities. Let me tell you about something I did a couple years ago, World STEM Works, which was an organization dedicated to empowering the civic scientist. Civic scientists are scientists and engineers who connect with their community and take active part in policymaking. The term was coined in the middle of the 1990s by Neil Lane, former chief science advisor to President Clinton. We've had great examples of civic scientists here today, people who share their passion with a receptive audience and engage on conversation on scientific issues in a way that everybody can understand. Other examples of civic scientists include Carl Sagan or Bill Nye the Science Guy, who not only is a science educated, but also can dance. Young people today are faced with an increasing number of hurdles in their career as scientists or engineers. It's become increasingly difficult to have a career in the STEM fields. Careers are becoming narrower and more specialized. And we're asked, as young students in the sciences, to pick a field early on and study it for years on end. And then we spend years studying those fields and spend tens of thousands of education dollars on them. And it's a bit like playing roulette. You get all that, and 20 years later, you bet it on black. And it turns out to be red. And you're not relevant anymore. My contention is that the hyper-specialization of science fields leads people to be uncertain what they want to study. If you choose the wrong path, you might not have the ability to change the world the way you want to. We have this perception that social sciences and natural science are mutually exclusive, and that you either have to study one or the other. Natural sciences are very rigorous, they're data-driven, they're quantitative. Social sciences are much more broadly applicable and easier to grasp. But that's just not true. What we really need is to be able to make sense of the technology and the advancements that scientists and engineers bring into the world. We need to be able to mesh those two fields together, the social sciences on one side and the natural sciences on the other, to create a new generation of scientists and engineers who not only are extremely proficient in their field, but are able to communicate the social implication of their work to a broader audience. Not only that, we also need to encourage policymakers to engage in scientific debate. And that's why I'd like to propose here today a new idea. By blending those fields together, we can create a new degree, a Master's of Public Technology, modeled after the Master's of Public Health, which will provide students of the social sciences with an understanding of the technologies that will change our society, and enable scientists and engineers, students of those disciplines, to get an understanding of policymaking. Only by bringing those two fields together will we be able to innovate with technology that can change the world, that can be applied to every one of us, and that all of us can understand. Now, I thought a lot about this, and I spent a number of years trying to get more people involved in STEM fields. And don't get me wrong, that's absolutely needed. We need more scientists and engineers, and we hear that everywhere. But we need to do it in a way that makes sense. We need to train people not only to discover truths and uncover them, but also spread those truths and combat misinformation so that all of us can engage in a scientifically literate and educated debate about science policy that will shape our future. Now, that's not going to be easy by any stretch of imagination. But I really think that we can do it. I really think that we can come together as a society to tackle some of these important issues, educate a new generation of civic scientists that have the potential to change the world. When I think about this daunting task, I can't help but remember what JFK said here at Rice University a couple of years ago. We choose to address these challenges not because they're easy, but because they're hard. I think that we deeply need to change the way not only we teach science and technology to this new generation of students, but also address the social impact new technologies will have on our society. Hopefully together, we can address all these issues, we can engage in these public discussions, and we can find a way to prevent Skynet from taking over. I encourage you to read more about the civic scientists and applaud all those past speakers that before me have shared with you their scientific fields, their experiences, and really made it accessible for all of us to understand and educate ourselves. Together, we can change the world of social sciences, the world of natural sciences, but more importantly, we can prepare ourselves for a better future.